Venus and Rahu. This is one of the more important combinations to pay attention to because it's typically one of the combinations that cause the most problems within a person's life when they have it, when it comes to the nodes with a particular planet. And again, how does this occur? Well, you get the north node of the moon and Venus in the same sign, or you get Rahu in the sign of Venus in Taurus or Libra. And how is this going to work? Positive or negative? So as we go through this video, you'll be able to think about these things. Positive tends to occur when Venus is in better dignity. Positive tends to occur when Rahu is in better dignity. And how do we know when a node is in good dignity? We see what sign that node is in, and then we see who is the lord of that sign. And whoever rules over that sign, you check that planet's dignity. The better the dignity of that lord, the better the dignity of the node. I know there are other ways to figure these things out, but this is the one that I found to work most often. So what happens when we get Venus and Rahu together? Remember, Rahu shows those areas of life where we don't have a lot of particular understanding from the beginning. We don't necessarily know how to work with it in the healthiest fashion. It's like you just pulled into a gymnasium and someone's playing a game that you've never played before, and they want you to play, and they don't tell you the rules. They just throw you in and say play, and so you mess up. You don't know what you're doing. You cause all kinds of problems because you don't know the rules, and no one ever told you the rules. So with Rahu, we're always trying to develop that planet. We've not really seen it work well in past lifetimes because we've not put enough attention towards it. So what is Venus? Venus is a sense of love, a sense of devotion, a capacity to make choices that lead to higher fulfillment, a healthy use of our desire nature. Now, a lot of people badmouth desires as though they're not useful, but there are healthy desires. There are definitely healthy desires. But most of us are so overrun by unhealthy desires that we assume all desires are unhealthy. So we have to be cautious there. And we have all of these planets, Sun, Moon, Mars, Mercury, Venus, Jupiter, and Saturn for a reason. They're all representative of an aspect of our consciousness, and we have to learn how to be in balance and harmony with that particular consciousness. So with Rahu, the person does not know how to recognize healthy love. The person does not know how to honor their desire nature in a healthy way. All right. This is why we get people with Rahu and Venus together. They're always coming to astrologers and their relationships never work out. They always pick someone who doesn't fit them, or they make choices based on their desire nature that gets them in trouble, and they don't understand why they can't have a healthy relationship. So with Venus and Rahu, I want you to be very cautious of the fact that you might not have any idea what it takes to be in a healthy, loving relationship. It's possible, all right? You're meant to learn, though, right? And how do you learn with the nodes of the moon, with Rahu? Well, I always like to say, whereas Ketu is a person's black hole, where there's an extreme obsession that they feel they have to meet, but really they're meant to kind of let go of that and detach from it. I like to say with Rahu, that's where you're drunk. That's where you don't have any ideas about what you're supposed to be doing. That's the area of life where, it's like if you have a friend who's drank too much alcohol, and they can't drive, right? They think they can. That's like Rahu there with love. Oh, I can figure this out. And they make a big mess of things and they wreck. But if you've got a good friend, what you do is that person who's been drinking, they talk to their friend. They say, look, I know I don't know quite when I've had too much to drink and whether I should drive or not. So I'm giving you my keys. And you're going to tell me, is it okay to drive? All right, once I've been drinking too much. So the same thing has to happen with Rahu and Venus. You need to know someone who has healthy relationships. And you need to say to them, I don't know what I'm doing. So you tell me, I'm thinking of doing this. Does this sound right to you? And then you listen to the person who has healthy relationships, because you're drunk in regards to love and relationships. You have no idea what you're talking about. And if you listen to them, you're not going to want to, right? Because you're drunk. You think you know better. You think, the world, you can conquer anything. You're not going to want to listen to them. But if you do, you will then develop this Venus in a very healthy way. Same way with Rahu and Venus. It can give an excessive desire nature, this need to want to unite with others, to be with others, to build something great with others, but you don't know how to do it. It can give a need to be passionate with others. It can make one prone to love affairs, to deceit within relationships, to also disenchantment in relationships. And that's the person who gets in relationships and then it works for a little while, but then it starts to fall through, which is a Rahu quality. Remember, Rahu is the head of the dragon without a body, so anything it eats, it just falls out the other side, which is why Rahu often causes things to fall through. But you get in a relationship, and then the illusion, the confusion of Rahu comes in, and you say, oh, well, this isn't quite right because of this, that, and the other, and you think you need to move on to someone else. When really the reality of the situation is that to be in a long-term, loving, committed relationship, it's not going to be enchanting all the time. You are going to, see the weaknesses and problems within your spouse, but can you love them anyway? That's what builds a strong relationship, not the perfection that Rahu and Venus kind of make you think needs to be there. That sort of grand idea. Rahu Venus often has a very Neptunian kind of energy as well. But that capacity to say, no, I can learn how to be truly devoted to people, to have my real desires met with the person, that will lead to higher fulfillment in relationships, to be able to support them and they can support me. And if they happen to enjoy my unconventional ideas of sexuality and so on, fine. If they don't, I'll figure something out. So we need to keep this in mind with Rahu and Venus, the obsession with new things when it comes to love and relationships, this confusion around the idea of perfection, finding the one in relationships. I always like to say that Rahu and Venus gives the person the soulmate syndrome, which is what? That there's that perfect one out there that's going to complete them. And that's what always gets a Rahu-Venus person in trouble, which is why it's a little better to work with Venus and Saturn, because that gives the capacity to focus on lasting, long-term relationships that can endure changes and hardship and looks beyond the confusion to reality. So with Venus and Rahu, oftentimes a person needs to develop their capacity of Saturn within relationships. Now, along with that, when a person has this Rahu-Venus combination, if they have the fairy tale syndrome, not always, or the soulmate syndrome as I call it, not always, but that can lead a person to be somewhat promiscuous because they're trying to explore themselves sensually all the time. They feel they just need more. Remember, Rahu always needs more, and Rahu is what creates addicts. So this can create what we call love addicts, or addicts of art and beauty because it's Venus, or addicts of sensuality, or addicts of needing to feel good all the time, when life isn't about feeling good all the time. It's about feeling good when it's appropriate, but at other times being realistic about things. So when a person becomes a little more sexually promiscuous, it leads to reproductive problems. So this would be more true if it was like in the 7th house or 8th house and so on, possibly the 1st house. But Rahu and Venus can give a tendency towards reproductive problems, but due to promiscuity. It can also give some emotional confusion and emotional problems because of connecting with other people emotionally inappropriately. When you get all tied up in someone energetically, you get tied up in their karma, and then things go all kinds of crazy, and you can't see yourself from, the other person. And the more people you do that with, the more you lose who you are, and the less you're able to be authentic in this world. That's why Rahu and Venus can give a tendency towards emotional confusion. But again, what's the answer? You need to talk to someone who knows how to be successful in love, who knows the proper use of sensuality, who has their desire nature not stifled, because we don't want to stifle it, but in control so that they can enjoy it when it's appropriate and let it be otherwise. You want to avoid this idea of suffering from being drunk on your karma of Venus and Rahu together. So these are the things to be aware of when it comes to Venus and Rahu combinations, and they're very important. They're not typically the easiest ones to talk about or work with an individual because people don't want to admit that. And oftentimes people don't want to do the hard work required to develop their Venus when we get Venus and Rahu together, because Venus isn't just about following your desired nature. Venus isn't just about getting all of your needs met. Venus is about doing it in a healthy way, right? And that is possible. So this is what we need to do with Venus and Rahu.